What's up, Ragin Nation? How's it going? This is Alex here, and you're watching the Marvel edition of the Ragin Nation show. This is Webster's. We're talking about all things matter me in the world of Marvel films. This is episode number 116, and in this episode, we're going to do my spoiler talkback discussion for X-Men Apocalypse. I already did a spoiler-free review in the previous video, so if you haven't seen the movie, you can check out that one. That way you know how I feel about the film without getting into any specific details. But for now, in this video, we're going to talk about specific things that I liked about the movie and also specific things that didn't quite work for me. So we're going to get right into it, and we're going to talk about the negatives. And the first thing I got to talk to you about is, in no particular order, Jubilee getting shafted. Bryan Singer cut her out significantly. She's still in it, but after all the hype about her being in this movie really made me quite disappointed, because all her scenes where she actually uses her superpowers are not in this movie anymore. So that is quite unfortunate. She's going to be in the deleted scenes, but there's not going to be a Jubilee cut for X-Men Apocalypse, just like how they made a Rogue cut for X-Men Days of Future Past. Now, apparently, Jubilee does get to use her superpowers in the film, but that is what got cut out. And the main reason why I'm pretty disappointed about that has really nothing to do with the fact that she's an Asian mutant. It's more about diversifying the team, not from a ethnic point of view, but more about the fact that this is a team that we've already seen before. We've seen Quicksilver, we've seen Jean Grey, we've seen Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Beast, and I do understand that they are the core team members of the X-Men, especially in the earlier stages of the X-Men in the comics, but Jubilee actually would have brought a new diverse mix to the team. And you know, she's somebody that we really haven't seen use her powers. We've seen her do a cameo in X1, X2, X3. I think she's in all three of them, but it's just a cameo appearance where she does nothing. And it would have been great to see her go up against Apocalypse, because she is a very unique type of character. She might not be the most coolest character, but she has a uniqueness about herself, especially if you're a fan of the cartoons that was aired in the 90s. So that's really unfortunate that she totally got shafted. Another character that got shafted was Angel. Now, I don't mean that they cut him out, but he's just the weakest of the Horsemen. He is the weakest link. Sure, he did have a cage fight scene with Nightcrawler, but that was probably his most significant scene. And he also got this really, really cool evolution scene where he goes from the feathery wings to the metal wings, which was pretty awesome. And then he did get to throw his metal feathers, if you will, at the X-Men. But other than that, all he really does is fly around, and then he flies around to his eventual explosive demise. So I think he's pretty much dead, but he's the weakest link, and I would have liked to see a little bit more cool stuff from him in the physical sense. Moving on, I thought that something that was really, really unfortunate was we got to see less Mystique and more, or rather too much, Raven Darkholme. You know what? The whole Raven Darkholme thing as a kind of leader just felt too much like emulating Katniss Everdeen. I've seen Katniss Everdeen, played by Jennifer Lawrence, in the Hunger Games. Keep that character in the Hunger Games. I really didn't want to see that in X-Men Apocalypse, because I want to see Mystique. I want to see her use her powers more and take advantage of her gift. And we don't get to see a whole lot of that. It is only substantial when she does that at the end of the movie, and that is really the only time she does that. Sure, she plays a leader, but like I said, it's something we've seen before in another film. So I would have loved to see more Mystique and less of Raven Darkholme, and I hope they do that in the next one if she does come back. Another thing that I found was a little bit predictable was Magneto turning the tables, as in really changing the outcome of the climactic battle, and that is turning good. We've seen this thing before where he changes sides. It's actually kind of like a running theme in the X-Men franchise, because it has to do with the whole Charles Xavier, Eric Lensher friendship thing. They're friends. At the end of the day, they are friends. They are really, really good friends. You've seen how they were like in X-Men First Class, and you see that friendship develop And in the back of the mind, Magneto's kind of like Darth Vader. He has good in him, but we're seeing too much of that, especially in so many films. We got to see that happen again and again and again, and then they end up playing chess together, which is, you know, a thing straight out of the comics, but it's just so predictable. So, you know, that happening was no surprise to me completely. You could have seen that happening from a mile away. Which leads me to talk about the big bad villain, Apocalypse. His name is Apocalypse, and sure, they gave us a CG citywide destruction slugfest, and, you know, that was cool for the most part, but, you know, after all that destruction, I want to see like a nice good old physical grand scale physical battle between him and all the X-Men. And, you know, Oscar Isaac, as much as he's a great actor, he doesn't have that imposing physicality about himself. So when I saw him standing next to the rest of the Horsemen, you know, Michael Fassbender being taller than him, it just felt really underwhelming, because you only see him grow big in a battle of wits between him and Professor X. And so it just didn't feel like he's a really, really a strong villain. Sure, he does a whole lot, but a lot of what he does is a whole lot of this, and then all this debris flies around, CG debris, okay? And that's all he does. He just does this, and then CG debris flies around. And that shows how powerful he is. And which brings me to talk about the final battle. I really enjoyed the one-on-one battles, but the battle between Apocalypse and Charles Xavier was just all of this. You know, I'm fighting you, I'm fighting you, I'm fighting you. You know, it's just a lot of that. And the Battle of Wits, I like to call it the Battle of Wits. That's when they're, you know, mind battling each other. That was just not something that I felt was a good way to convey the big climatic battle. It would have been a lot better if he had like grown to his larger size and then just try to beat everybody with his own physicality, and they had to all just do some crazy things to beat him. That would have been really cool. So that was a little bit underwhelming, and that's pretty much all my complaints about the film. I do have a lot of positives though. I will tell you that the very first thing that I loved about the movie is, of course, Quicksilver. Quicksilver stole the show in Days of Future Past. He steals the show once again in Apocalypse. And it's not just one scene, it's several scenes, 3 scenes to be exact. And to top things off, they added more depth to his character. He joined the X-Men. He didn't join the X-Men in Days of Future Past, but he joins the X-Men in this one. And to top things off, they add more of like an emotional aspect to his character, because he is, after all, the son of Magneto, so they follow up on that. So that's really cool. Psylocke. We got to talk about Psylocke. She was adequate. Okay, I'm not going to say that she got shafted. She was adequate. Just the right amount of screen time for a minion. Minions usually don't get a whole lot of screen time, like Angel. But she did a whole lot of fighting. She did a lot of fighting with Beast, and I felt that those scenes were pretty cool. It's great that she survived, because we're going to see her again in the next one, hopefully. And then we could maybe see her do some more badass stuff with her abilities. Moving on, I really enjoyed the Jean Grey and Scott Summers relationship as it developed. It was kind of like an origin story for those two characters, so I'm glad they touched upon that, because in X-Men they are already a couple. In this one, we get to see that relationship develop, and hopefully in the next X-Men film we get to see it develop even more. So that was great. I'm glad they you know, explored that aspect of those characters. And which brings me to talk about Cyclops. I think that this is the best version of Cyclops in the X-Men franchise. James Marsden was great, but this is an origin story, and everybody loves a good origin story. This is the origin story for Cyclops, and what we got to see was not only how he came to be, but also as Cyclops, he does a lot in this film. He does a lot more than he ever did in all of those other films in the past. So really, really awesome stuff, and you get to see the evolution once he learns to control his powers to being a full-on X-Men with the suit, and also, of course, the goggles which control his beams. So really, really awesome stuff. Moving on, let's talk about the emotional aspect of Eric Lenscher's character, a side of his character that we've never really seen in the previous films. This was awesome. I thought that was a very fresh thing about the character. Kudos to Bryan Singer for really exploring this aspect and also bringing it to the big screen, because we keep on seeing Magneto doing the same thing over and over again to the point where it's a little bit predictable, but this was something else. We get to see a human side of him, and this is straight out of the comics. We get to see his motivations, and it was a pretty moving scene to see that happen. You know, that little sacrifice that his daughter did, or it wasn't much of a sacrifice, but it was more like a tragedy. And, yeah, it was a tragedy, and that really, really resonated with the characters, and it was really, really a great scene. So very, very awesome stuff. I also love the scenes with Dr. Hank McCoy. Beast did his thing. We've seen that before. It was great in this one. It was great in X-Men Apocalypse where he fought Psylocke. But what I also loved about his character was when he was Dr. Hank McCoy. We got to expand upon him being a genius. We already got to know this in X-Men First Class, but I love that we get to expand upon more of that and get to see him more as a, higher class of a character, especially when he's in the X-Mansion. He has a bigger role. And speaking of big roles, Alex Summers, I loved seeing that he was not just a background mutant. In First Class, I viewed him as a background mutant. He wasn't that significant, but in this film, he does a lot more as Alex Summers. I like that they also showed that, you know, Scott Summers and Alex Summers are brothers, and also the fact that, you know, he died, but you know, something happened before he died, and because he was trying to save Charles Xavier. So there was an emotional aspect there, and it really created more of the motivations for Scott Summers to do what he ended up doing. So that was great. Now the best part I gotta say about this movie is Wolverine's cameo. Big surprise there. We saw it in the trailer, but still, I didn't expect it to be that awesome. Weapon X, totally in his full glory, just taking out bad guys, like full-on pushing the envelope of the PG-13 rating with a lot of bloodshed and gore. That was awesome. What Bryan Singer did with Wolverine was totally what he always wanted to do, and I think that this was it was almost like a kid in a candy store where you get to do all these wonderful things that you always wanted to do. So it's great for him to unleash the beast, and this was a great opportunity for that. That was an excellent scene. Big surprise, loved every moment of it on all its violent glory. So those are the positives that really stand out to me. Now I'm going to talk about what's next for X-Men. I mean, the next installment of X-Men. Well, hopefully we get to see more Psylocke, and they bring her back, and you know, with every X-Men film, what they do is they bring back returning mutants and also introduce more mutants. I would love to see more of her character evolve as a character, all right? And of course, her abilities. Moving on, another thing that I'd like to see for the next X-Men film, of course, they hinted at Mr. Sinister, aka Nathaniel Essex, with the Essex Corp scene at the end credits scene. That is pretty cool that they did that. It got me all excited. And what I'm excited about is the fact that this is where we get to see, I think, a really substantial mutant character, a villain. You know what I'm saying? Because Apocalypse, you know, that's exciting, but we saw what they did with the character, and I think it was a little bit underwhelming. But with Nathaniel Essex, we can really see what it means what it really means in terms of mutant evolution, and not just mutant evolution, but mutant evolution towards evil, because he is all of what that's all about. So Mr. Sinister is a pretty substantial villain in the X-Men universe, and I can't wait to see that happen. All right, moving on, I would love to see more Jubilee. Jubilee got shafted in this one, and this is a great opportunity for the sequel to really add more diversity to the mix. Bring her into the movie, okay? Don't screw this up, okay? Bring her into the movie. I mean, the next one. Number 4, I want them to address and follow up on all that destruction that took place caused by Apocalypse. He took out cities. All these buildings came crumbling down. A lot of people died. There was a huge body count, and death toll was probably like in a really stupid number. So I want them to address that. I think that it's important for them to address that because it really affects the way people feel about mutants, because that is, after all, the theme in the movie, I mean, in this franchise. So therefore, it's important for them to address that. Don't just jump into the 90s 10 years later and not talk about that. I think it's important to really address that. Moving on, something that I'm really curious about is Magneto just going to do the predictable thing, and that has become evil again after turning good? I mean, he wasn't really turning good, but he did something to turn tables in the final battle. He once again became back to good friends with Charles Xavier. What is going to happen with his character again? Is he going to repeat the same cycle? What is he going to do? I'm really curious, all right? Which brings me to talk about Raven Darkholme. I want to see more of Mystique. If Jennifer Lawrence is coming back, and I don't really need to see her come back, if she is coming back, give us more Mystique. I want to see some type of transition to evil. I know it's not necessary for them to transition to evil because pretty much with X-Men Days of Future Past, Bryan Singer pushed the reset button and they could do anything they want at this point in time. It doesn't mean they have to follow the comics. They can do anything they want. It'd be pretty like a good thing if they followed the comics. But I would love to see Jennifer Lawrence play a full-on evil character. Her character was kind of neutral good, okay? Not a full-on evil, but I would like to see her play a full-on evil character just like she did in the first X-Men film, all right? So, the last thing I'd like to talk about for this list of things to come for what's next is I don't want to see Dark Phoenix Saga. It's too early for that. In the next movie, I want to see Scott Summers and Jean Grey develop a relationship and hint at Dark Phoenix Saga. Let a whole feature-length film develop the relationship, and then the next X-Men film after that, bring in Dark Phoenix. They have introduced a new cast of X-Men members. This is an opportunity for them to really explore their characters. Don't just have her turn into Dark Phoenix and then kill her off again just like they did in X-Men Last Stand. That is not the way to do things. Let the relationship develop, bring in Dark Phoenix in the next one. Okay, so that's what I have to say for things to come. The last thing I want to talk about is questions that I have about the movie. And, I really just have one main question, and that is Mystique Stryker. At the end of X-Men Days of Future Past, Mystique transformed himself to Stryker, and then she rescued Wolverine at the end of the movie from drowning. And that is supposed to suggest that she negates the Weapon X project because she saves him from being taken by the hands of William Stryker. All right, that's what we're led to believe. But in X-Men Apocalypse, he still ends up in the Weapon X project. So what is that supposed to mean? What does that even mean in Days of Future Past when Mystique saves him? Is it trying to tell us that no matter how you change the course of history, fate always ends up finding its way back to what's supposed to happen? Is that what they're trying to tell us? If it is, then, why pushing the reset button? I mean, why start changing things? I mean, they can do whatever they want, but they decide to bring this back. Make no mistake about it. I love that cameo appearance from Wolverine and the whole Weapon X thing. I think the Weapon X thing is very important for us to see as fans in the X-Men movie universe. But what the heck does that even mean when Mystique transformed into Stryker and saved Wolverine? Does it just mean that fate will always find its course? Is that what it means? If that's the case, then it should apply to everything else. All the little things, all the events that would have occurred. So, I don't know. I just think that's a little bit silly. I would love to see Bryan Singer and Simon Kinberg address that. Last thing I want to ask a question about is SS Corp. At the end of the movie, we get to see the DNA from Logan get taken from the SS Corp guys. That suggests that X-23 is coming. After all, Bryan Singer did pitch the idea of X-23 to James Mangold. But considering that this is an X-Men film, I'm wondering that is this X-23 thing for the next X-Men film, or is it for James Mangold's upcoming Wolverine solo film? The reason why I ask this is because if it is for the James Mangold's film, what time period does James Mangold's film exist in? When does it exist? X-23, if she ends up being an adult, then is this supposed to take place? Does the James Mangold film take place after the events of X-Men Apocalypse, or does it jump somewhere else at some point in time? I would like to see that answer, just because that would mean we're going to somewhere between the 80s and the 90s, and it would make sense if there was a linear timeline. If they would just stick to a linear timeline, it would be less confusing. I mean, they don't have to spell it out for us, but what's going to happen? I know this is something that we'll see eventually, but I just want to know what their intentions are. You know, like a lot of times, just like the Mystique Striker thing, they just throw things in there and they don't bother to really elaborate on how this affects everything else at the end. I mean, you know, in the future films. And that's how you screw things up. That's how you screw up continuity. So, what is going on? Anyways, that's all I really have to say in this video. I really enjoyed the film. I liked it. I just thought the final act was underwhelming, but other than that, they nailed everything else. I thought everything else they did about this film was excellent, but Apocalypse was just underperforming. I mean, underperformed. So there you have it. Anyways, let me know in the comment section below what are the specific things you liked about the movie and the specific things that you didn't like about the movie. And let me know your thoughts. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, like me on Facebook, The Ragin Nation. Also follow me on Twitter at Ragin Nation. My name's Alex. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace. The movie, how was it? It was good. I enjoyed it. I liked a lot of things about this film. What I liked about this film the most is the